We've seen Whitfield Diffie's system for sending a secure code across distance. We've also seen John Dee's system for sending a secure code across time. And deep down, their concepts turned out to be the same, which shouldn't really be a surprise because distance and time, according to Einstein, are essentially the same thing: space-time. Diffie's invention caused a paradigm shift that literally changed the world. Dee's invention, once recognized, is going to cause a similar paradigm shift in the world's perception of who Shakespeare really was. Sure, right now when we hear his name, we don't think science or astronomical equations. We think plays and poetry, right? Yet his plays and poetry are actually full of references to stars, moon, sun, comets, eclipses. We've just assumed for 4 centuries that he's only using those words poetically. Well, what if that's not the case? Why on earth would Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford, sometimes called just Oxford for short, go to the trouble of enlisting his friend, John Dee, greatest cryptographer of the time, to devise such a mathematically elegant system of sending a secret message to posterity, to us? Why not just write it on a piece of parchment, sign it, tape it to the underside of the altar? It would still be found eventually, no need to jump through all these hoops. Unless the numbers themselves and the patterns they form are as important as the inner message they are wrapped around. Quantum physicists today are verifying what the ancient philosophers have always said. On the surface, it looks like we live in a world made up of all these different elements, but deep down, hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, they're just different numbers of electrons, combinations of the same one thing, that elusive God particle. Isn't that what Shakespeare's saying in The Tempest? We are such stuff as dreams are made of. And in Twelfth Night, when he has a drunkard and a clown say 4 times, it's all one. The message is the code. And the question should not really be who was Shakespeare, but what was he, she, they, whoever this mysterious entity was. Whether you're presently a believer in the Stratford story or are already curious about the alternatives, I should warn you, it's even bigger than anything either side has yet imagined. And our preconceptions about the writer, that small screen, black and white, grainy film that's playing in our collective consciousness right now, is about to explode into widescreen, technicolor, surround sound, like that moment in Wizard of Oz that changed cinema forever. Because in this story, there's a real wizard, Dr. John Dee. He was the leading mathematician and cryptographer of the age, astronomer, navigator, Hebrew expert, Queen Elizabeth's astrologer, and super spy in Europe, code number 007. He documented years of seances in which he was conversing with angels. Now, whether they were what we today think of as angels, or let's say extra-dimensional beings, whatever they were, they certainly were helping Dee with his mission to create a cryptographic masterpiece whose purpose was to hide the true story of the greatest cover-up in literary history and pass it on securely across time so that it could be revealed once the world was ready to fully receive it. And that time is now. The secret has been decoded, and I assure you, you'll never think of the artist formerly known as Shakespeare in quite the same way ever again. The game's afoot. I was first introduced to this deep rabbit hole by a friend, Michael Dunn, who invited me to his one-man show, Sherlock Holmes Solves the Shakespeare Mystery. He grew up
in a nearly bookless town, as the son of parents who could neither read nor write. For that matter, he never taught his children to read or write either.
I went, as one does, to support a friend, but really reluctantly. My whole life, I had never had the least interest in the man we English call the bard. It just means poet, but in England, he's the poet. Like many people, I had a block about the costumes and the arcane language and how they all speak as though they have hot potatoes in their mouths. Nevertheless, I went to my friend's performance, and within the first few minutes, I was utterly hooked by that list of anomalies we were never told about and the obvious cover-up they implied. I knew immediately this was the story I'd been waiting for. I had to write it as a musical. I figured I'd spend a year researching, writing it, 18 months tops. But the more I learned, the deeper the story grew until it couldn't be contained within one singular sensational theatrical experience. It needed to be a novel, a trilogy, part historical drama, part modern-day espionage thriller. I had the whole story mapped out, right up to the final scene where my heroine solves a bunch of codes and wraps up the whole mystery with a big red bow. Ta-da! But at the time, I knew nothing about Renaissance codes, and I figured, well, I should at least read up on how they actually did codes back then. So, while I was at it, I decided to go to Stratford and see the church for myself. So I did the tour, took some pictures, came back home with a rubbing of Shakespeare's gravestone, stuck it on my wall, and all the while furiously reading up on John Dee. He's this master cryptographer. He used a grid method called equidistant letter sequencing, or ELS. It's a system that puts the letters of a text into a grid so it then reveals hidden messages vertically. I happened to compare the rubbing I'd bought with photos that I'd taken of the actual gravestone, and I noticed a problem. The rubbing had only a period where the actual gravestone had a colon. It turned out I had stumbled quite by accident upon something no biography of Dee seems to have ever noticed, that he expanded on the ELS system by creating grids that could give one solution by excluding punctuation and another by including punctuation. And more amazing yet, they complemented each other. This revelation, brought about by the missing dot on the rubbing, literally shook my world and opened up almost 2 decades so far of stunning codes and solutions I'm really excited to share with you. So the first thing is you need a sense of the layout of the church and where the key touchstones are that we'll be looking at in detail to solve the puzzle. This picture was taken during dress rehearsal for the music concert I gave at the Stratford Church. Shakespeare's gravestone is right behind the piano. His text is cryptic, heavily suggesting a cipher. It doesn't even have Shakespeare's name on it. That's touchstone number 1. Shakespeare's monument is on the wall above my head. Its text is even more suggestive of a code. The Latin lines are grammatically wrong. The English hardly makes any sense at all. So that's touchstone number 2. And a few yards behind me is the Holy of Holies altar stone. It too is very suspicious. But hey, I brought it back with me so you could see for yourself. Just kidding. Let's go have a look at it. Every consecrated Catholic altar stone has to have 5 crosses on its surface, representing Christ's stigmata wounds. When I first examined the one in Shakespeare's church, I saw it had only 3. But I also discovered a 4th cross of a different size and style cut into the front side of the stone that should not be there. So right away, there's a lot of mystery surrounding this 800-year-old holy relic. Not least of which is the fact it was not even there during Shakespeare's lifetime. It had been hidden deep in the church catacombs at the start of Henry VIII's Reformation. The ancient entrance to the catacombs is still marked by a cross on this flagstone outside the church. We don't know how far these medieval tunnels go underground. They could be anywhere within this area. But we do know the altar stone was not found deep in those ancient crumbling tunnels, but just inches below the stone slab flooring here in 1889, hidden beneath someone else's altar tomb in the South Cross Aisle transept. Clearly, it had been deliberately moved from the hard-to-access tunnels to a place where they knew it would easily be found eventually, which it was. They cleaned it up, reinstated it in the most sacred spot in the church where we see it today, next to the gravestone and the monument and my piano. The solution I showed Diffie states clearly this altar stone is where Shakespeare has left the answer to the puzzle, which of course was why I was there that day, setting up this huge banner to obscure the view of the altar as we prepared to radar scan it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. In order to fully comprehend the codes you're about to see, we need to refresh our memories as to what happened on Mount Sinai nearly 3,500 years ago. Cast your minds back. After the Lord speaks to Moses from the burning bush, telling him to deliver a message to the elders, Moses asks, "Who shall I say sent me?" And the Lord answers, "Ehyeh asher ehyeh," which translates as, "I am that I am." It's the first time in the Bible that the name of God is revealed by the Lord himself. Each word starts with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, and in a simple cipher that was well known during Shakespeare's day, the alphabet is revolved so that the first letter Aleph becomes the last letter Tav, mimicking what Christ said in Hebrew, "I am the Aleph Tav," the beginning and the end. Thus, the three Alephs become three Tavs, and their Greek equivalent, three Taus. These three letters were adopted by Royal Arch Freemasonry and are known as the Triple Tau. They allude to the three crosses at Calvary, which, as we know, were just simple Tau crosses. The three T's were compressed into a symbol wherein all are joined at the base and surrounded by the shape we know today as the Star of David, but which was originally the Seal of Solomon. The connected T's also resemble a TH, which for Freemasons holds three sacred meanings represented by Latin phrases: keys to the treasure, place where the precious thing is concealed, and First Temple of Jerusalem, Solomon's Temple.